So far, we've created one static component and one dynamic component. The second one, the dynamic component, allowed us to configure some properties on the fly, but it was still pretty simple. In this next example, we're going to look how to do something a little bit more complex by nesting one component inside of another component. So what is nesting? Well, nesting is the idea that we can place one component inside the other. To do so, we simply pretend that the child component, the one that is getting nested inside of the other, is an HTML element in our JSX. So let's look at an example of nesting here. And we're just going to throw some pseudocode down and kind of walk through it real quick. So let's imagine that we have a component called form. And we're going to create a class. And we're going to add our render function. And it doesn't really matter what this form element is. Let's just say it's a, it's a form of sorts. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to return an outer wrapping element, which is just going to be a div. And let's also imagine that up here I declared my badge class. And so I'm going to return my outer wrapping div, and then internally to nest the badge inside of the form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat it like it's an HTML element, and I'm just going to write badge. So now, when I ever render form, I'm going to get an instance of badge inside of form for free. Okay, so you might say, okay, I can tell form to create a badge, but we know that badge needs stuff like the title and the number, so it needs these properties passed to it, right? So we need some way of passing properties from form down into badge. So the syntax for doing that is we really just add it on as an additional attribute on this element right here. So I'll write title, and title can be whatever we want it to be, and then number can be whatever it wants to be. And I'm just going to add a couple of spaces in for right now, just for clarity. We normally wouldn't leave so much white space in here. So now when I'm inside of badge, when I'm inside of the badge class, badge is going to have this.props is going to have two properties, and it's going to have the property title and number, and it's going to be whatever we set these to be equal to. So let's imagine that I said for title, we're going to say inbox, and then for number 5. Now, if I had declared my badge, and we'll say just for right now, this is going to be a button. In here, I could say this.props.title, and I'll say dash this.props.number. And in the first case, this.props.title is going to be equal to whatever I passed in as title up here. So in this case, this.props.title would be equal to inbox, and this.props.number is going to be equal to 5. Okay. So obviously, if we kind of stick with this kind of paradigm right here, where I hard code in these attributes right here, this isn't tremendously useful because I get a form that's really only good for making one type of badge. So we need some way in here of figuring out, well, I don't want to always be passing in just the string inbox and the number 5. I want to be able to specify it dynamically. And so what we're going to do is same kind of rule of thumb that we've been going with all along whenever we're working with this.props. We're going to replace the hard-coded value with curly braces and a reference to this.props. So I'm going to say this.props.title and this.props.number. So now when let's say down here, I create my form, and I'll say react.create element badge, form, and I need to pass in my options right here. So let's say options equals title of inbox and number of 5. So now I'm going to create my element, passing it these options, this options object. We're going to create a form, an instance of form. So when form runs, when form executes and its render function gets called, form internally is going to say, oh, I need to make a badge. And when I make this badge, Well, I know that this.props.title is equal to inbox, so I'm going to pass that down into badge, and the same thing for number. So this is kind of a recurrent theme that we're going to see a lot of in React is these properties being passed to the most parent element, which in this case is form, and then we can kind of watch those properties trickle down to the children. So in this case, badge needs to know about title and number. So we're going to have these properties trickle down from form into badge. This is going to be a very recurrent theme. We're going to do something just exactly like this, as a matter of fact, in the next section. And you'll find that in all the continuous sections, this is going to be something that we're going to see a lot of, is this concept of properties trickling down. Okay, so to explore nesting a little bit more, we're going to do a real world example. We're going to be making a custom thumbnail of sorts. And well, what is that? Let's take a glance. We will open our browser and go to getbootstrap.com. And then on the top is components. And then on the right-hand side, we see thumbnails about halfway down the list. And there's a default example that's kind of boring. We're going to go something more interesting. We're going to be making something that looks just about like this, and we're going to call it a custom thumbnail. So our custom thumbnail has an image, a header, some text, and then a button. Well, this button right here, let's kind of pretend that we're going to be making a thumbnail here that is going to describe a online course. And let's say that perhaps this is going to be an online course for learning about React. So what I want to make is a thumbnail, and the button right here that I can click on is going to say some text I want to be able to specify on the fly, and then I also want to have, we're going to kind of imagine that the button is also going to have a number on it that says how many courses there are to learn this subject right here. So if we kind of think about this, there's kind of two components that we want to make here. The first is this outer thumbnail, and then the inside of that thumbnail is going to know how to specify the image, the header, and the description. And then inside of there, if we want a button that has some text and a number, well, that really just sounds like our badge, right? So we're going to be making reuse of the badge component, and we're going to nest it inside the thumbnail here. So I got a quick little image of kind of the end product in diagram form that we want to have. And so the outside is going to be the thumbnail, and then internally we're going to nest the badge inside of here. And this concept is called composition. All right, so let's tackle composition. We'll get started on the thumbnail example in the next section.